Hello class, today I'm going to be giving you a quick overview of our latest reading assignment. We're going to go over a little information about the author, the plot, the characters, and some style devices and motifs and themes that come up. So this is His Name Isn't Frankenstein and Other Lessons from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. The novel we're reading is Frankenstein, sometimes known as the modern Prometheus, and we'll get into why it's called that a little later. It was written by Mary Shelley, and as a lot of you might already know, the story came about in a very interesting way. Shelley was spending the summer with her family at the poet Lord Byron's house. The group staying at his house got bored, and Lord Byron challenged everyone to come up with a ghost story, and Frankenstein is the byproduct of that challenge. Shelley wrote it first as a short story, and then, with Lord Byron's encouragement, turned it into a full-length novel, which was published anonymously in 1818 and published with her name in 1823. Frankenstein depicts the downfall of an ambitious young scientist, Victor Frankenstein, as he creates a human-like monster by reanimating pieces of human corpses. The work draws from romantic as well as Gothic elements of literature. 200 years later, after its publication, the novel still grips the minds of readers around the world. So the story begins from the perspective of Captain Robert Walton, an ambitious captain on a quest for scientific discovery, but more importantly, glory. He is writing a letter to his sister detailing how he found a young scientist named Victor Frankenstein chasing an unknown creature through the North Pole. The story shifts to Victor's perspective as he recounts how he ended up there. Victor, once a curious, promising scientist, discovered how to reanimate corpses after the death of his mother. However, his first creation was so grotesque that he abandoned it out of sheer disgust, which ends up being a huge mistake. We'll see that later on. Rejected and abandoned, the monster went on a killing spree with the goal of making Victor feel as tormented and isolated as he feels. After losing his entire family to the monster's wrath, Victor makes a vow to get revenge on the monster, which is what led him to the North Pole. He warns Walton to be careful as he pursues knowledge and glory. Later, after parting ways with Victor, Walton discovers the monster grieving over Victor's dead body, having finally fulfilled his ultimate revenge on his creator. So a little about the characters. Our main one is Victor Frankenstein, of course. Victor is the intelligent, ambitious scientist who discovers the consequences of the pursuit of knowledge after reanimating a corpse. Then we have Frankenstein's monster, not to be confused with Victor Frankenstein. Abandoned by Victor, the monster transforms from gentle to vengeful, and his goal shifts from companionship to revenge. Then we have Elizabeth Lavenza, one of the few female characters in the book, and we'll get into why that's interesting a little later. She's Victor's adopted sister turned bride, who falls victim to the wrath of Frankenstein's monster. Then we have Robert Walton. With the same curiosity, intelligence, and ambition as Victor, Captain Walton serves as Victor's foil because he, unlike Victor, stops his quest before it's too late. Where did it happen? The narrative travels from Geneva, Ingolstadt, France, and the mountains of the Alps and the North Pole. Throughout each setting, the element of the natural world exists. Regardless of the setting, the characters constantly note nature and the weather's effects on them, which shows the romantic element of the natural world. So, the novel Frankenstein was written during the Romantic era of literature, and when I say romantic, I don't mean like love romance. It's more about nature and the grandness of your surroundings. It also has some Gothic influences, but the focus on nature really reflects the romanticism within the novel. So some stylistic devices. Point of view. So the novel takes multiple perspectives. It uses that as a framing device, which allows the readers to empathize with each character and understand their motivations and draw parallels between the different narrators. The story is told from Robert Walton's perspective, then Victor's perspective, and then the monster's perspective, and you get different understandings of each character depending on who's telling the story. It also calls the credibility of each storyteller into question as each one recounts their experiences, some of which are unknown to other characters. For example, Victor's side of the story is in comparison to the monster's. We get an entire section of the novel where the monster is going through different situations that Victor has no idea about. So when the two meet up again, Victor is surprised at the change in the monster's attitude towards him. Then we have imagery. As we mentioned before, the heavy focus on the character's surroundings and nature rather than the scientific details reflects the spirit of the Romantic period and its emphasis on the natural world. For example, the way Mary Shelley glosses over the actual creation of the monster. Instead, in that scene, they focus more on the lightning and the storm, but not the technical, scientific aspects of the creation of the monster. And in a way, this is used to show the smallness of man in comparison to the grandness of nature, and to show just how fragile humanity really is. Then we have the significance of the title. So the title, Frankenstein, has been misconstrued over the years to refer to the nameless monster instead of Victor Frankenstein, the creator. Although readers know that Frankenstein is supposed to refer to Victor, enough dissonance has formed since the novel's original publication to blur the line between creator and monster, causing us to ask ourselves, who is the true monster? So we have symbols and motifs. One of them is women. In their obsessive pursuit of knowledge, the men of Frankenstein destroy the women in their lives. Victor's mother, Elizabeth, Justine, and the female monster make rare appearances throughout the novel, where they are portrayed as quiet and submissive. Their deaths end up making more of an impact than their actual actions when they are alive. These female characters now, in today's society, offer a platform for modern feminist critique of the novel, and it calls into question some of the themes later of ambition, and whether some of those critiques of humanity are just critiques of men. Another symbol and motif is fire. The recurring mention of fire serves as an allusion to Prometheus, a character from Greek mythology who lived in eternal suffering as punishment for stealing fire from the gods. So if you haven't heard the story before, Prometheus stole fire from the gods, and when they found out, they condemned him to live a life of eternal suffering where I believe it was birds pecked at his intestines every day for all of eternity. Frankenstein, sometimes known as the modern Prometheus, mimics this in the way that Victor experiences pain after playing God by going against the natural order and bringing the dead back to life. Fire, like knowledge, illuminates and destroys. So one of our themes is ambition. Those who blindly chase glory without considering the consequences will bring upon their own demise. At one point, Victor Frankenstein says to Robert Walton, "Learn from me, if not by my precepts, at least by my example, how dangerous is the acquirement of knowledge, and how much happier that man is who believes his native town to be the world, than he who aspires to become greater than his nature will allow." As we see from Victor's downfall, ambition is something to be feared, blind ambition to be exact. And we see that throughout the story in the way that his whole life is destroyed after he attempts to play God in a sense. Another theme is revenge. Man's desire for revenge is what really turns him into a monster. The monster eventually says to Victor, "You can blast my other passions, but revenge remains, revenge, henceforth dearer than light of food. I may die, but first you, my tyrant and tormentor, shall curse the sun that gazes on your misery." It wasn't until the monster started to go and want to destroy Victor's life that he really started acting as a monster. Before that, Victor just kind of viewed him as a monster because he was kind of gross looking. But up until that point, he hadn't done anything to really be considered a monster. It was only once he tried to get revenge and made that his life's goal on Victor that he turned into what we consider a monster. And also Victor, in the same sense, that he eventually decided he wanted to get revenge on the monster, and in a sense turn into a monster himself. So the question I want you guys to think about for class tomorrow is, who is the real monster of Frankenstein? Thank you guys, and I'll see you in class tomorrow.